This is the AMP Business Podcast, a weekly show featuring the top leaders, innovators, and hustlers that are making it happen in Northern California. Here's your host, Chad Alderson.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the AMP Business Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Alderson. With us today is Commander Aldridge, Billy Aldridge from the Chico PD. Billy, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in, man. So I've been talking to a lot of folks about the homeless, population in Chico, and by and large, the majority of them are not causing problems, but there is a contingent that I believe causes most of the problems. It seems to be the consensus across everyone I've talked to.
Absolutely.
Depending, even it's a bipartisan kind of a agreement that it's just there's a certain contingent. So what I want to do today on this episode is really kind of get behind the scenes from your guys' perspective, target team's perspective on, where you guys are having successes, where you guys see opportunities to improve. How can the community help you guys, make your jobs easier, whether it be funding or, community support or whatever that would be. But to really just kind of unbox your day-to-day and talk through some of these issues.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, so let's just start with you. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a little town just right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, and I noticed you've got a tank buster playing on your tie there.
Yeah.
Is there a story there?
Well, I was in the Air Force for 8 years, and this is an A-10,
the Warthog,
and so it's always
possibly
been
one of the most badass machines
yeah,
ever built.
Absolutely, and it keeps proving its worth, and they keep pouring money to it. So I know there's been talk of replacing it, but man, it'd be tough to replace this guy because it's been around for a while and it's proven its worth.
And it's just one big Gatling gun with wings.
That's all it is. The plane was built. Awesome. Plane was built around the gun. So. Yeah. And then the pilot sits in a tub of armor, so it's absolutely a good ground troop reinforcement when they need it.
Cool. So what's your educational background?
Well, I have a master's degree in organizational management, and then I have one in human resource management. Just wanted something a little outside of the norm for a guy who's in law enforcement to have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice management. So I always figured if I decided to promote up through the ranks, that'd be something that helped me see a different side of
HR and organizational management. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then if it didn't work out for me in law enforcement and decided to leave, I'd have something to fall back on.
Well, that's cool. And then how long, when did you get to Chico?
I came to Chico in about 2001. I started working in law enforcement in September. So I'm going on that 18th year now.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
What got you into law enforcement specifically?
Being in the military, you get used to a lot of structure and, rules and regulations. And, I started thinking about things I wanted to do outside of the military, and I knew I needed that same structure in my life. And I also wanted something that made me think on my feet all the time. So I thought to myself that, what fits that bill? And it looked like law enforcement. So did a few ride-alongs with agencies, and then, I got hooked, and the rest is history.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like you would ever have a boring day.
No, no, there's never been any true boring days, so to say.
Yeah. Well, let's talk target team. What's your response? You head up, correct?
Yeah. That's one of the units that falls under my division that I command.
Cool. What is it, first of all? What is target team, and how does it relate to the homelessness in Chico?
Our target team is really, their mission is dealing with all quality of life crimes within the city. It doesn't necessarily have to be with homelessness problems. It can be any kind of ongoing neighborhood issue, any other issues around the city that have a nexus to that quality of living that we have within the city at times. So they have a pretty diverse mission in that they can bounce around different parts of the city and deal with those issues as they come up.
And you said quality of life crimes, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so would that be somebody jacks my car overnight in my driveway kind of a crime?
Yeah, and so
Not jacks it, but maybe rifles through it and steals
through it,
whatever's
steal
inside.
stuff, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly deal with things like that. And typically, what we find is, people will have video cameras on their house, and they'll see a person on a bicycle ride up, or someone walk up, and those folks are typically known to our target people because they. More times than not, we find that they are transient in nature, and they're out on their bikes or on foot at night, late at night when everybody's in bed.
Well, while we're on that particular subject, because that's happened to me personally twice so far. I've lived here 3 years in my in my driveway. What can people do to kind of maybe discourage that kind of a behavior in front of their house?
Yeah, we have a program that's called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, and we can do an evaluation on your business or your house.
Oh, cool.
If you so feel that you need it, and the idea there is that you prevent crime through that design of the environment around your business or your house. The basic things are remove all the valuables from your car, lock your vehicle. Try to keep those crimes of opportunity from happening. People look into your car real quick and they're looking for that quick grab. But if it's not there, typically they're going to move on. Right. So that's really the first step is removing those items, locking the cars, keeping a lot of lighting on in your driveway at night, motion sensors, things of that nature. And then there's a various, myriad of other things that we tell people to do around their businesses and houses to keep them from becoming victims of burglaries and things of that nature. But those are some basics that we just provide to people that, hey,
yeah,
crimes of opportunity, let's prevent them by removing the items.
And a way to, who would they contact at Chico PD to get a consult?
Yeah, so Sergeant Cesar Sandoval works for me. He's the supervisor of the target unit, and anybody that wants to call in and request that can request to speak with him, and
that's pretty cool.
Then he can get that set up for you.
So, how big's the staff? Let's talk about Chico PD in general. How many heads do you guys have?
Yeah, so we're going to be at our all-time high once we get all of our training spots filled and everybody off of training. We're going to be upwards of 105. Sworn police officers, and that's from the chief down. Okay. So right now we have a couple in the academy, we have 5 in training, and then we still have this morning we were in a management meeting and I heard that we have 6 spots currently available. So
okay.
Still playing catch up. It takes a long time to get people hired and trained and on the street.
How many people out of that 106 you said? 105. How many are on the target team?
Well, currently we only have a sergeant and 2 officers on that team. We had to pull 2 from that team a little over a year ago to keep staffing levels in our patrol division up to par. And the idea is that as trainees come out of the system and we get back up to that 105 number, we can put 2 more bodies. Back. Yeah, put 2 more bodies back in target and bolster that to 4.
Yeah, I expected it to be at least twice that.
Right? It should be.
It's crazy.
It should be.
Okay. Yeah. And you're willing to still do consults at homes?
Well, I mean, we're going to do it as we can, we can schedule it in. We did have a community service officer that was attached to the unit, but he had to be sent back to patrol for staffing reasons, and he was the one that was really heading that up. But if there's something that we can do to help you out and give you some information to prevent you from becoming a victim, then absolutely we'll do that.
Are there like volunteer folks you can work with that maybe you train them on how to, basically, crime of opportunity proof your home, and then they can go around and do it? Just kind of delegate that a bit.
Absolutely. We've got our volunteers in police service, the VIPs, who are absolutely amazing citizens in the city who volunteer their time and
cool.
Put out thousands of hours. And so they would be a great group for that.
Yeah. Cool. So what's a difference? Because I didn't know that there was a difference. So what's the difference between the street crimes unit and then the target team?
The street crimes unit, in terms of the way it used to look and be called the street crimes unit, was a team of officers with a sergeant who would focus on the street level habitual issues that we were having with, drug dealing, burglaries, violent assaults, robberies, things of that nature at the street level. The target team's more of that quality of living issue, dealing with the really more of the less violent crime, and helping citizens solve problems in their neighborhoods. Whereas the street crimes, which will, once we roll that out full time, their name will change to the D team. So D team will be in line with our teams that we have. We have an A, B, and C team on patrol. We're going to make them the D team, instead of calling it a true street crimes unit. And they're going to go out and continue doing the things they were doing. But we want to kind of change the view of that team.
And then how many people will be on the D team compared to the target team?
So right now, I believe it's scheduled to have a sergeant plus 4.
Okay. And would it be correct to say, though, that the quality of life crimes in terms of frequency is higher than the street crime, drug and violent stuff, or is it about the same? I just feel like you guys are understaffed on the target team.
We are.
That's what it feels like to me.
Woefully understaffed on it.
Okay.
But that's not to say that's not going to change here in the near future.
Yeah.
As staffing comes up with trainees coming out of the system.
Yeah.
But I would say that, we have our share of violent crime on the streets in the city. It's tough to say which one's more than the other, but I would say that right now, as it stands, they're probably neck and neck in the race. We have our share of all those street level violent crimes, and we have our share of issues. And
there's probably crossover too, a lot, I would guess.
I would say that a lot of it is the same clientele that we deal with.
I like the clientele. Like it's almost like you have a hotel and free rooms with bars to put them behind. So in terms of the target team's goals, one, when was it founded? And then what were the goals like back then versus today? Has it morphed over time or no? Has it pretty much stayed the same?
It's changed a bit. I believe we started it initially in 2011, 2012 timeframe. At that time, it was a sergeant and 4. And we at that time focused more on dealing with those areas within the city where neighborhoods were having consistent problems with certain locations. And so, like, we went over to Columbus Avenue, and the apartments that were over there were having nonstop problems with, drug sales, the just constant, fights and things that were breaking out in those apartments over there. And so we worked with those property owners to kind of revamp their model on housing and the type of individuals they were allowing to live in these locations, and how much patience they were giving to those residents in times of or chances that they were giving them for making mistakes and violating the rules of living there. And so our target guys at that time did a really good job at changing that the perspective of those property owners and cleaning up those areas, and made it more of a friendlier environment for other families to live in. We had a few of those kind of situations where that team had cleaned up. We had, a couple where it was just standard residential houses, single family houses, where one person was causing a problem in the whole neighborhood. And they would go and deal with that and figure out how to solve that problem, and keep it from reoccurring. Whereas now, we're more focused on a lot of the transient related problems we're having throughout the city, the illegal camping, all of the, drug use that's occurring around the downtown area, the trashing of our park system throughout the city. So a lot of what they're doing now is related around more of the transient homeless population and the issues that come from that.
Do you feel like it's just, it seems, so I'm unique in that I lived in Chico in the late 90s, early 90s, all the way through the late 90s, and left in 2001. and then I came back 3 years ago. And my experience before I left, in terms of noticing a homeless population and the impact it's had on me personally and my friends, there's definitely a difference. And I've lived in the Bay Area, where there's homeless there, and I've also lived in Santa Monica, which is arguably the mecca of homelessness. So I'm a little bit desensitized to it. I've seen what it could become. Chico's nowhere near that, but at the same time, experience is a relative thing. And if your only experience is dealing with homelessness in Chico, and it looks worse than it did 10 years ago, then it's a real thing for you.
Right.
So have you noticed, is it just my perception that I'm just like maybe looking for it more, or is it actually a real thing, a real issue?
Yeah, I think that it certainly is an issue in the city right now. There's no doubting that you can't, go down to the downtown area and either not witness some sort of homeless related activity or be accosted by some sort of, homeless or transient person, trying to get money or whatnot.
Yeah.
I used to think that we had a huge problem in the city, and then I went down to LA and I was shown Skid Row by a buddy of mine who works in law enforcement down there. And it gave me a kind of a bigger perspective that, wow, maybe we don't have as big of a problem as I thought we did, but it's all relative in size.
Yeah. But I do like having the experience of living down there, just because it does kind of show a road sign for where things could be headed if we don't get it by the horns now.
Absolutely.
Right. And give you guys the support that you need on the enforcement side to do what you're doing, because you guys are going to have to work in concert with the shelters and the other folks that are part of that apparatus to try and figure this issue out. Right.
Yeah. And we do that on a daily basis.
Yeah. And they all said that. And I'm really stoked that you guys are, there's a lot of transparency, it sounds like,
Absolutely.
between everybody. What are the two biggest misconceptions that the public has about the target team today?
I would say that, I think there's this feeling that there's the ability to go out and just make people do things, take people out of certain areas.
You guys are just, you don't have the legal power to do that.
Right. So right now we have a couple tools on our belt that we can use to resolve problems. But we need people to realize that if we don't have a legal right to remove someone or give them an order, then we're not going to go out and violate someone's, civil rights, just because others don't like the way it looks. It's not illegal to be homeless. So, if they're violating the law and they're homeless, then obviously that's an issue. But just being homeless in itself is not a crime. So we're going to do everything we can to, try to solve the problem at hand and get that person some services, and hopefully, get them off the street and get them back to being productive in society.
Yeah. You touched on the laws and the ordinances, and I want to kind of go through them, because there's not a litany of them, but there are a few that I think put some operational constraints around what we can do. The first one is the sit and lie ordinance. Can you kind of explain what that is, and if it makes your jobs easier or harder?
Yeah, so we had the sit and lie ordinance for several years, and then it sunset on us there, I think in 2015.
Meaning it's no longer something is not on your tool belt.
Well, in 2015 it sunset, and then 2018 we were able to get it back on the books.
Okay.
So we do have it.
And what is it exactly? So
the sit and lie just means that within a business area, a person can't, be sitting in a sidewalk blocking the sidewalk. They can't be in entryways to businesses, and preventing the free flow of patronage in those areas. And then it can be used in other areas of the city, when it comes to blocking that right of way and things of that nature. And then, we only use that as a tool to gain compliance and move people out of the area when they're causing a problem. we haven't even cited for that, I don't think, so far since we've had it back on the books. We just use it as a tool to gain compliance.
Makes sense. And then the Ninth Circuit decision on Martin versus Boise. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Boise.
Boise. So, what is that?
Yeah, so that was more pertaining to the illegal camping.
Mm-hmm.
And what that case said was that, the city of Boise was sued because they were telling transients they could not be sleeping outside in the public space. It was challenged. It was somewhat upheld and somewhat not upheld, in that what they said is, if there is a shelter in your location and they have open bed space, then you can't be out camping in violation of the city ordinances,
okay,
or the penal code. And so what we've done to ensure that we're not violating that is we have a partnership with the Torres shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And so every day in the evening, they send us an email and they tell us how many open bed spaces they have. So we used that tool. It said that you could have elementary bedding. It didn't say that you could have a full-on camp set up to sleep outside in the public space. So
I want to just unbox what elementary bedding means. You're just talking
Sure.
about a bedroll on the ground.
The way we understand it, the way our attorneys understand it, and the way other cities view it is, if you have a blanket or a sleeping bag, and you're laying on the ground, sleeping with that covered up, that is elementary bedding. If you start getting into tents with, full-on cots set up in it, or mattresses laid out, then that becomes more, outside of the scope of that elementary bedding.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm like I've said on this podcast, I spend a lot of time on the water, so I see a lot of encampments, on the water along all of our watersheds, and there were some folks this week that posted some stuff on Facebook that's been going around the local community. I think it was Big Chico Creek, probably around I don't know, one of the pools, I assume. There's a bed. I would classify it as elementary bedding, but there's also like a shopping cart full of crap, and then crap everywhere.
Yeah.
And no one in sight. So there's a bit of this gray area for me, because it wasn't necessarily a cot. So it's got to be tough to kind of make a call in the field. Do you guys just get calls from your guys and saying, hey, here's a situation, where does it fall on the legal precedent threshold?
Yeah, that's where that sergeant comes into play. And,
Yeah.
they go out and take a look at it. But if they are, any bit questionable about it, we typically leave it alone. But the other issue here that I want to answer for you is you can't have any kind of camping next to greenways. And so throughout the city, we have, several creeks that run through the city, and we have rules that say you can't camp within 150 feet of a greenway. And the real reason behind that is they don't want debris being left behind and then washed away in the water system, or people going down and using it as a facility to clean themselves or relieve themselves. So we do have that on hand. And so it doesn't necessarily, the Boise case doesn't affect the way you police people camping next to greenways.
So why the F do we see it everywhere in Chico then?
Yeah, I mean, it's all over. We get calls on them all the time.
Is it a resource issue
for
you guys? I mean, there's just so many calls that you're overwhelmed? Is that the issue?
Well, obviously it becomes a staffing issue when you have so many calls coming in about
I mean,
these
you've
camps.
only got 2 people really.
Right.
to
And then
with.
when we go to these camps, we have to post them.
What do you mean by that?
We have to post them for a 48-hour removal. So we don't just go down and clean up the camp. The state has said you need to give them notice. There was legal battles in the state over just picking up people's property that were camping in those locations and discarding it as it was potentially left behind as garbage in most cases. But so you can't just do that anymore. You have to post it, and then
So it's like a whack-a-mole situation, basically.
It's complete whack-a-mole. Complete. You clean one up, another one pops up. all over town. We've done that. We've partnered with the park system, the Butte County. I can't remember the acronym they use, but the folks they take out from the jail and clean up in the system,
Right.
the park system.
Yeah, I've seen those guys down. Yeah.
ACS, alternate custody systems, what it's
Okay.
called. And so they partner with us. We schedule these cleanups. We schedule DPW to bring in tractors and trucks, and and so we'll clean it up and spend a lot of money doing it and time, only to find that the next day they've built another
quarter mile down
the creek.
upstream.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, perfect world. How do you solve that problem? This is near and dear to my heart, as you can see.
Yeah, man, I wish I knew the answer to that, because that's the million dollar question right now, is how do you fix it?
Let me rephrase it then. So, are there cities anywhere in the U.S. that have a similar problem that are, you think, doing something interesting or creative to solve the problem? Is there any case studies?
We've looked at several cities and to see what they're doing with these kind of issues, and it's statewide.
Mm-hmm.
With all of the legislation and watering down of our crimes in the system, there's not a lot that we can do nowadays. With all the propositions that have come out, and releasing of people early from prison that are habitual violators, there's no golden answer for that. Right now, it's just a matter of staffing, and how do you get to each area and police it, in a timely manner to prevent it from occurring. Obviously, here in the city, we've got a huge park system. So staffing becomes an issue when you want to try to police that entire system and keep people out of it. We're working toward that. We've now got a sworn park ranger in the city who has peace officer powers, and the plan is to add on another 2 over the next couple of years, one of which will go to the academy at the end of this year. So the golden answer really is, there's a lot of moving pieces in that. Everything from staffing all the way up to legislation and how we're dealing with it. Short
term, preemptively, identifying something that maybe unfolding. What I mean by that is basically somebody's moving into an area with, it looks like, the intent to set up camp. Is that something like a citizen can call and say, hey, this looks like it's going to happen. Can somebody come by and check it out and maybe discourage this behavior or something like that?
Absolutely. We tell people all the time, call us. If we don't know about it, we can't do anything to help you. So, as your local law enforcement, we rely heavily on our citizens to be the eyes and ears for us. We can't be everywhere at once. So when we get calls from citizens, we certainly go out and deal with those problems. And hopefully, we mitigate it from becoming a bigger problem by getting to it as quick as we possibly can. And so that, is coming upon the citizen to give us a call when they see it. As soon as they see it starting to occur, give us a call.
Do you know the number off the top of your head?
897-4900.
We'll say it again at the end of the show.
All right.
Okay, so I want to contextualize the problem, and we talked about it a little bit when we first started the show, but I wanted to contextualize it because there was a Facebook post I saw in my news feed from one of my friends who I consider to be a pretty optimistic person and generally upbeat. Right? She said, "What is happening to Chico right now? There are homeless and crazies walking all around every square inch of this town today. I've never seen it like this. I feel like I've lost my love for this town." And, she's born and raised here. That scares the shit out of me, reading stuff like that, And I know it does to a lot of people that are listening, and I think the only way to solve this is to come together as a community and be very deliberate about it. Whatever we put into action, I think it's going to take a lot of volunteer labor, literally brute force labor to get the problem solved. And I think to also give you guys more budget.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. It's going to take the citizens kind of rising up to say enough's enough, and we're done with this, and we're going to be a part of the solution. And whatever that movement is, I'll leave that unsaid. But there's going to be a movement at some point where the citizens are going to rise up, or have to rise up, and start demanding different things for their city, and speak with their local leaders about it.
Yeah. Let's talk campfire.
Okay.
How has that impacted your team?
Well, we saw about a 20% increase in our population after the campfire, almost overnight. And, the calls for service went up, not only for the target team, but just for us as a department in general. When you add that many people to a city, you're inevitably bringing, some problems with you. So our target team has been able to, still manage, but they're stretched thin. Certainly has brought some other folks into the area that we did not have before. But overall, I don't know that that has created a huge problem for the target team. Where we're really seeing the problem right now is within our traffic throughout the city.
Right.
Our traffic unit trying to keep up with that with 3 officers.
Right. Did you guys pick up anybody from the Paradise PD after this?
Yeah, we have one officer from Paradise PD who's in the training program right now, and he was a really good catch for us. Good officer. Unfortunate for Paradise and the things they're having to deal with, but we offered if there was going to be any kind of issues with funding for their department and people who were going to potentially lose their jobs, that we were hiring, and we were open and ready to accept some people.
Cool. And then do the rest of the guys on Paradise PD, are they still up there kind of like we're looking for just people jacking homes and stuff like that, because there's just not a lot of community up there right now? Or
yeah, from what I understand, they've lost several officers since the campfire, and then obviously their number of people living in the area has not come back up to anything close to where it was before. It's just a small amount of people living up in the area, but there's still a lot of areas that are burned over and have not been cleaned up, that they're finding people, trespassing, looting, and things of that nature. Right. So quite a challenge up there for that department and city right now.
I want to get back to the quality of life crime stuff for a minute. We talked about, I've talked about on the show previously, there's roughly 100,000 people in Chico based on the last PIT survey. Roughly 1,000 of those folks are considered to be homeless. Within that 1,000, how many represent the majority of the quality of life crimes in Chico, just roughly? Out of that, let's talk the 1%.
Yeah,
out of that 100% of the 1%, is it 80-20?
Yeah, I don't.
20% being.
I can't give an accurate number to that. The old saying of 10% of your people cause 90% of your problems, taking 100% of your time, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
So, I would say that, our people that we consistently deal with, comparing that to the numbers, it's going to be a small percentage of people that are consistently taking our time to deal with.
Yeah.
As far as like an accurate number, maybe that 1-2% range, I would say, if we're talking potentially, 1,000 people that are listed as homeless in the city. I'd venture to say that it's roughly that, 1 to 5% range of people who we are consistently dealing with.
Yeah. And I think that's an important distinction for people listening. It's not, I don't think it's fair to vilify all homelessness in Chico, because people just sometimes have shitty luck. Sometimes they can't, they don't have the mental capacity to deal with life.
Right.
They have mental health issues.
Yeah.
But the contingent that we're talking about is the one, that I'm passionate about trying to solve. I think that there's systems and infrastructure in place right now to help with this other segment that aren't necessarily, causing all these quality of life issues for the rest of us.
Oh yeah.
And there's good people doing good work around that. It's just this, I just feel like we're kind of hamstrung legally on what we can do with this small percentage of the population here in town that are causing a lot of angst, anxiety, and just general mistrust in a lot of different parts of our infrastructure in Chico.
Yeah, I like to say that in my own personal opinion, I look at three groups in the homeless. You got the folks who absolutely want no structure in their lives, no rules in their lives, and are just choosing to live on the street because that's their lifestyle they've chosen, whether it be they've been in trouble before and just don't want to do anything to clean up. You've got the folks who are truly in need of some sort of mental health assistance, and the state not having the mental health hospitals has made it tough for local behavioral health agencies in the counties to deal with. And then you've got folks who truly are caught up in a vicious cycle.
You're talking like drug addiction, stuff like that?
Well, I'm talking more about the folks who need a job in order to have a house. And in order to do all of that, they need a car potentially, but it's a cycle that they can't break. So they don't have a house to live in so that they can get a job, and they don't have a job because they can't get there, and they can't get there because they don't have the money to buy a car. So it's this cycle that they get caught up in. And this is the percentage of folks that we can truly help break that cycle. And then the behavioral health units throughout the state are doing everything they can to help that other group break that cycle and get them the help they need. But you're always going to have that group who just choose to be homeless. Yeah, and it's because they want no structure in their lives, no rules.
And I would argue that this is the population that I'm talking about that gives our community the most angst.
I would certainly agree with you that that's that 1 to 5% of our total homeless population.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's just like the public perception is that drug use, overdoses, and theft are on the rise and worse than ever. What does the next 10 year look like? Is it trending up or down?
Drug overdose is trending up. The opioid addiction that we're going through throughout the nation. Here locally, we started a program last year with the naloxone for administering to folks who've overdosed on opioids. We got that program up and going. We got several of those kits through grants through Butte County Behavioral Health, Butte County Public Health, and we also got some through the state Public Health. Since we've had that program in place, we have a kit in every patrol car. We've administered 14 different kits. So if you take that number and you say that's just in 1 year that we've had this program going, and just think back, we didn't have that prior to 2018 where we were dealing with this issue. We would go to help out medical calls when the person was combative and whatnot. That was very few and far between. But we are we're responding to those things pretty consistently now. And
what was the rationale for putting these kits out in the first place?
Well, the idea is that law enforcement officers are always going to arrive on scene well before any kind of medical personnel do. And so there was potential for us to save lives. And I would argue that we have with this program, with the 14 kits that we've, or 14 individuals that we've administered it to, but also because of the growing fear of fentanyl-based drugs out there nowadays, and the officers coming into contact with that, if they themselves were to become in a situation where they are overdosing based on touching or breathing this fentanyl drug, and then their partners being able to administer that drug to them also.
Has that had to happen yet?
We had one situation where that occurred, and it was a pretty scary incident, but luckily the officer's fine. And so we've had several incidents in the city of drug overdose and we had a mass casualty situation.
I remember that.
Last year, where we were first on scene and administered several of those kits. So, I'm very thankful that we have them. I'm glad that we chose to participate in that program. There are views out there that having those available just enable folks to feel
Take
this
bigger
false
risk.
sense of security.
Yeah. It's like if you're going to walk a tightrope with a net or not a net,
Right.
you're going to approach that tightrope a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of think about that as a policy, but okay. So do you know, this is kind of a stats based question, but do you know what percentage of 911 calls are homeless related or quality of life related issues?
No, that would be almost impossible
Yeah.
for us to break out. I know they get hundreds of 911 calls a year in our center. If it's ever something that's not a true emergency, they immediately have the person hang up and call the non-emergency line.
You mentioned there's 105 officers, is that right?
That's what we're authorized.
That's what your
That's not
target
what we're
is.
absolutely
Okay.
at right now.
There's 100,000 people in the community. Is that a typical ratio for a city, like police force, basically?
No, not necessarily. I mean, if you do simple math, that's 1 cop per 1,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
The FBI used to put out statistics on what you should have in a city, and it used to range from 1.3 to 1.7 cops per 1,000. So if we even took the lower end of that scale and said 1.3 per 1,000, then we should have, 130 cops. So if we look on the lower end of this scale here, we certainly need to look at potentially growing more in the future. But it's not cheap for a city to grow a police force because cops are not they're not cheap. They're expensive.
Pensions and everything else.
Everything that goes with it. Yeah. And I would argue that rightfully so. These folks right here putting their lives on the line every day to keep you safe.
Yeah. So in terms of the homeless, let's just talk about the 2 to 5% that we were talking about earlier that are perceived to be causing most of the problems. Are they local or are they coming in? Are they busting? Some people would say. Do you know?
Yeah. A lot of them are local folks. We do have people who kind of blow in and become new to Chico that start causing us problems. We've certainly had our share of that. We've had events held here in the city where homeless folks and their animals were bussed in for fairs of some sort where they provide health care and clothing and then also some help for their animals like vaccinations and give them food and things of that nature. And we've noticed that sometimes when that happens and the bus leaves to take people back, the bus is not as full as it was when it arrived. So there's no doubt that we get new people blowing into town and staying for a while, or people who've been here for a while that leave for a while and come back. It just kind of fluctuates, but I'd say the vast majority of our homeless population are from Chico.
Okay. Let's talk strategy really quick. What policies can we implement in order to be more effective with the actual criminals while acknowledging that ongoing issues with homelessness and the reality that they are going to have people living on our streets for some time to come? I guess it's basically the root of the question is just balancing, actual criminals with that other contingent of the homeless population. Again, it's this 3 to 5%, I guess, is what I'm worried about. Policy wise, I guess we touched on it a bit, but it's really, it sounds like just identifying it, identifying potential mischief as quickly as possible, letting you guys know, coming up with maybe some different city level policies to give you guys more arrows in the quiver, if you will. I guess what I'm getting at is, are there legal city policies that would help you guys, if they were in place, help you guys make your jobs easier to do, or let you guys be more effective at your jobs and not feel so hamstrung?
Yeah. It's not necessarily local policy that hamstrings us. It's state level policy making that causes problems, and the removal of certain laws on the books that once had some teeth to the bite no longer exist. And the court system being so backed up that DA's offices just don't have the time to prosecute the more minor cases that are out there, and try to use other methods to solve it, such as plea bargaining. And so typically the jails, as we've seen over the years, have been pretty full. And so when you have a full jail and you have a DA's office who just doesn't have the staffing or the court schedule to prosecute the load, then these plea bargains typically happen and people get supervised probation and they're released without any kind of jail time.
Whatever doesn't tie up the facility.
Whatever doesn't tie up the facility.
And defense knows this.
Absolutely, they know it.
And
Absolutely.
so they game the system basically to around this constraint.
Yeah, and so do the violators. They know it very well. They know that they're going to get a little slap on the hand, and they're not going to see any jail time for these lower level offenses. And so it's incumbent upon us as a department, when we do have cases that we know are ongoing issues and a person is a habitual offender, then we need to work hand in glove with the DA's office to make sure that they prosecute those cases and don't plead them out, and mitigate that person from being a problem on the streets again. Are there any
cities in the U.S. where you think of your typical jail system as huge concrete, thick walls and big bars and just like almost like a penitentiary feel, but is there kind of like a lower cost facility that could, anything out there right now where it's a lower cost facility, but it's specifically built for these kind of like lower level crimes, to just park somebody, make it inconvenient for them so that there is some sort of a consequence, but not have a huge drain on taxpayer dollars?
No, there's not. I know there are some privatized jail systems out there, but there's no lower level facilities, so to say, other than your local jails in counties where that can be a resource for you to house people. We've been working with the sheriff's department here to potentially identify a couple beds for us to put those habitual offenders when we need them placed in jail for a period of time. And it may be that we're trying to get the person involved in some sort of resource that is going to take a little time, but we need a place to house them until that resource becomes available.
And you mean someone like the tourist shelter, or someone, it's kind of a temporary holding pen, if you will, until you can get them into some sort of a whatever service program they need to get into to hopefully get out of the cycle they're in. Correct. Okay.
Yeah, and so that's a mutual partnership that everyone has to be on the same page with. The court has to be on the same page as the jail staff, the sheriff, and all of the service providers throughout the city and county.
Yeah, and I've talked to all three service providers, or four in town now. They're going to start sharing their data, in terms of their case management data, because up until I think recently that hadn't been a thing, and it kind of blew my mind away that maybe the tourist shelter doesn't know exactly what the someone coming into you said a client coming into the Jesus Center would be doing. And it's like, if you're trying to put together some sort of a care management or case management system to bring these people from, say, whatever ails them to being recovered, then you have to have some continuity in terms of how they're handled in the system. Absolutely. And so that in terms of sharing the data, your interaction or your department's interaction or your team's interaction with that transient or that person who's causing problems, do you guys only right now, or is the data that's being shared only specific to open bed counts, and if you've got a place to shuttle them, essentially?
Yeah. So like I said, every night we get an email from them just sharing that data so that we know, there's a bed available for someone if we need to place them. Yeah. And in other terms, if a person is out there violating those rules of camping in public space, the Boise case becomes an issue for us. So we have to know that information in order for us to make good educated decisions on what to do with that situation at hand. So sharing of data absolutely has to be a key piece in this whole consistency. If we're all to be on the same page and all making the same decisions when it comes to helping mitigate these problems, then there's nothing better than that, than sharing of information with each other, resourcing, networking, and things of that nature.
Yeah. From a data sharing perspective, is there anything else other than open beds that would help you guys do a better job, help you guys do your jobs easier, more effective? I'm just trying to get at, what can help you guys grease the skids on this stuff.
I think that the point in time surveys are really important for us. It allows us to understand, what that level of homelessness is out there on the street, so that we know, how can we work with those service providers to mitigate any of those issues for, say, the inclement weather. When the inclement weather comes, and we know that, and I'll back up a little bit here. I got the numbers for you. With the point time survey, we had 590 total homeless in Chico, 389 of which were unsheltered, meaning they're out on the streets, and 201 which were sheltered in Chico. And that's people who kind of couch surf around town and things of that nature. And so, it's important for us to have those numbers, but and share that data, because in the times of need where we have inclement weather, in the winter times, and we want to try to get people into shelters, we're not out there trying to make life hard for people. We're actually trying to help people. We want to get them sheltered. We want to get them back on their feet and help them become productive members in society. And so as much data sharing as possible, we certainly will share data with our partners to make sure that if they need that for any kind of grant related type information, then we're giving that to them, because it only helps each of us to do that. And so, I know that we release information all the time at public requests that come in, but our partner agencies, whenever they have that kind of material that's needed, they call us and we deal with it.
Moving on to I want to talk about the courts a bit. So we've got the district attorney's office and then the court itself. How does the target team work with them? What's the relationship in terms of, give me the 101 on how it all works. I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, first off, I just want to make it clear that the DA's office, they have their own staffing issues with having those prosecutors on hand and the amount of caseload each one of them has to carry. So the DA himself has to make decisions on what kind of cases they're going to pursue and what they're not going to. The court absolutely will do whatever the DA's office wants to do. If the DA's office wants to prosecute some low-level case, then they're going to allow it to happen. The court isn't necessarily going to say no. The issue that we've run into lately is we're using our city attorney to prosecute municipal code sections. The DA's office doesn't want to handle those.
What does that mean?
So what that means is, so the city has their own municipal code. It's kind of like the city's laws, right? You've got the penal code, which is state. You got the vehicle code, which is state, and so on and so forth. If it's the municipal code, the DA's office has said, look, we just don't have the staffing to deal with those citations that come across for things like violating the sit and lie ordinance.
Okay, so a quality of life crime falls under municipal code.
Well, it could also be a penal code, right? Depending on what it is.
Okay.
But if it's a municipal code section specifically, the DA's office, they are not prosecuting those for us. That's the city attorney's office that's dealing with that. So,
and because of staff resource issues?
The way I understand it is it's completely related to resources. They just don't have the staffing to deal with those low-level cases, which I can completely appreciate. We have worked diligently with our city attorney's office and the courts to ensure that it's seamless in dealing with these municipal code sections. So when we're using them out there, our records division with the police department is ensuring that the city attorney's office is immediately brought into the loop along with the court, so that there's no misstep along the way and the case gets kind of flushed because of a lack of involvement from the city attorney's office or the police department. So we've outlined a process recently where we identify specific court dates for those sections. The city attorney's office is brought in 2 months ahead of that court date to ensure that they are being prepared for the case. And then the court has also said, hey, we're going to try our best to lump all of your municipal code sections together or violations together, so that the city attorney's office, who's down in Southern California, only has to come up once for these cases.
They just stack them that day.
They stack them. So that's the plan, right? And so far it's working fine. We had some hiccups along the way earlier on when the DA's office said, hey, we just can't do this for you. But we have since cleaned that up, and now I believe that's flowing pretty smooth.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk community. How can the community help you guys?
Yeah. The community involvement is a must with the police department.
Voting's one.
Voting can be one. Whatever your particular perspective is. Everyone needs to get out and vote. That's your civil duty, I believe. And whatever your political views are, at least go out and vote and make them known.
And quality of life crimes affect everybody. This is a bipartisan issue.
Yeah, I don't think there's any kind of issues amongst any of the community leaders when it comes to quality of life crimes. Everyone wants to have a city where it's safe to work, recreate, and enjoy your time around your house. And
you did mention there's a volunteer contingent that goes around. Was it VIP?
Yeah, the VIPs.
Yeah.
Volunteers and Police Service.
Are there any other programs folks that might be listening can get involved with to help you guys out? Cleanups, anything? Yeah,
there's the Park Service volunteers. They go out and clean up the parks every weekend. The Department of Public Works runs that through the Parks Division, and they're always looking for volunteers to come out and help. We do about twice a year, we do a Citizens Academy at the police department. It's, I believe it's 13 weeks of instruction on what it is we do as a department. And it gives really good insight as to the things you just would see or hear about on a daily basis. And I've been teaching in that now for about 13 years. And I think it's a huge education piece for our citizens who come through that, and they get to see a different side of things, and they become our supporters out there, even more. And they were, maybe they were supporters before, but once they go through that class, they really start to see the bigger picture, and they start to become those voices for us out in the public when people are saying things that aren't necessarily true, and they set them straight. And we need more citizens like that. So we recommend get involved in that and go through that course, because it's highly informative and it's fun.
Cool. Let's talk morale.
Okay.
What are the toughest parts of the job for the team, for the target team specifically?
I think the toughest part is, the day in and day out monotony of the same thing over and over.
The whack-a-mole piece of it?
The whack-a-mole piece of it, yeah. Mm-hmm. So it gets taxing on you knowing that you're going to go out and deal with the same people every day for the same violations. And it becomes kind of pushing water around, if you will. And then there's, they get tasked with things that they don't necessarily think they have the support to deal with. But nonetheless, they take their mission serious and they go out and they push forward.
Well, I think there's, I've had jobs in the past where I felt like that. And, as a manager for those folks that are feeling like that, and then people maybe listening to the show and in a similar situation at their own jobs, what do you tell your guys, your gals, to help get them over the hump when they have these kind of like shit days?
Well, I've had several of those days where I've felt that myself, but you have to remind yourself of what the true mission is, and remind yourself of what it is you signed up to do. And really, you have to focus on the things that you can make change with. You can't focus on the things that you have no ability to change, and move forward every day. Go out and produce and make, at the end of the day, just try to find one thing that you made a difference with. And however small, I think that every day in this job, we can find something where we can say, hey, hang your hat on that hook there, that you made a small change today or a small impact on something that meant a lot to someone. You don't know who it was, but rest assured that you did make an impact on someone that made their day a little bit better.
What do you say is the most rewarding part of the job?
As a target officer, or just in law enforcement in general?
Let's talk target officer and then the law enforcement in general.
I think the most rewarding as in target is, specifically helping those community members who have had the ongoing problem of whatever the topic is, solve those issues and increase their quality of living from where it was. We've had that on a daily basis where the target officers go out and they talk to a citizen who has, in their eyes, might be a huge problem. In our eyes, might be a little bit smaller. But they did something that helped to mitigate that problem and increase that person's quality of living.
Okay, that's really interesting. So what do you think the recipe is? And I'm sure it's prescriptive, a lot of it, but what are the key components to kind of having that interaction with an individual on the street and affecting change, like that catalyst? What are the basic components to kind of make sure that they're maybe not going to be successful, but at least headed in the right direction or set up for success?
I think it's being honest with people. You have to let them know there's certain things we can do and there's certain things we can't do. And the things we can do, we go out and we do it to the best of our abilities. And, however small, it has an impact on people. And if we can do that on a daily basis, it doesn't matter that you didn't have a huge gain for the day. As long as you had a bunch of small gains throughout the week, then you've had a huge gain at the end of the week when you go home for your days off.
Yeah. And, prepping for this particular interview, a lot of people are really, really worried about you guys, like in terms of the morale, because I said whack-a-mole a couple times during this interview. And for me personally, that would be deeply frustrating. So how is the morale of the team right now? You did talk about, how you guys deal with it as a department and as a unit. But the overall morale of the team, how do you guys cope with it? How do you stay focused?
I think the morale is fine at this point. Sergeant Cesar Sandoval does a great job trying to head off any of those issues that he sees coming that may become a morale booster or a morale killer. And then try to introduce something that boosts morale. And then when there's issues coming up that he knows is something that's beyond his means, he comes to me and we collaborate and put our heads together and try to figure out a way to make something that may not be so inviting just a little bit better. So, good supervision, good management, understanding that, the people have different views on, what's fun and what's not fun, and what makes them happy every day in the job. Is a dynamic piece of supervision and management. So we, I think we're doing a pretty decent job at making sure that occurs on a daily basis. Cool.
Looking ahead. So I'd heard that there was a new jail going in. Is that still the case?
I don't think it's a new jail. It's just
an
enhancement to the jail.
So it's still on track?
I think so. I haven't heard any more about it. I do know that, they got that state funding.
Okay.
To get that done.
Do you know roughly how much more capacity in terms of percent it'll go up? Was it 50%? Is it 90 or?
I don't think it was huge. I want to say it was like 50 beds or something like that. I can't remember.
But that sounds significant in terms of you guys being able to deal with that 2 to 5% that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what the number of those beds will be that they end up taking in people from state prisons, though.
Oh,
So
okay.
I believe there's a piece to
I didn't know
the
that.
funding for that.
So this isn't just for the city of Chico.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah.
What can people do to make sure that you guys have some of that carved out?
Yeah, our chief is working with the sheriff to hopefully identify some space for us to use with those habitual offenders and things. But, I don't know that the citizens can have an impact on that, so to say. I think that comes from just good relations with the sheriff's department and making sure that open communication and concerns are voiced with the sheriff from our chief as to our need and what the benefit is to the overall countywide.
Does the sheriff live in Chico?
I think he lives in Orville.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the biggest team? What is the team's biggest challenge over the next 2 years, do you think?
Right now, staffing and dealing with the overall growth of the city with, the problems we're seeing.
The campfire and
yeah.
Biggest opportunity?
Biggest opportunity, I think, would be continuing to work closely with the Torres Shelter, Jesus Center, all those service providers to reduce the overall number of 590 from the point in time survey.
When was that PIT survey? That's 2017?
No, that was just
recently.
this year. Yeah.
Okay, so I need to stop saying 1,000. So it's more like 5. It's almost 600.
Yeah. So the city, the numbers.
Setting the record straight there.
Yeah. Let's set the record straight here. So in Butte County, it was 2,304 total. And then in Chico, it was 201 sheltered and 389 unsheltered.
Okay.
So you have 590 total homeless listed during the point in time survey for the city of Chico.
And that was this year, this PIT survey?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where I saw the 1% and then how I got to the 1,000. But anyway, record set straight. So we're on 600 just to round things up because I'm stupid at math, as I've clearly demonstrated. Okay, so that's about it. Like before we go though, is there any question that I didn't ask that you would have liked me to ask, or any additional thoughts or points you want to leave us with before we cut you loose?
No, I think you pretty well covered it there. I just want to voice that the department is working hard. We're always looking for ways to be creative in managing all the issues we have throughout the city. Yeah. Staffing has been that issue for a while, but we've been able to get support from the council members and city manager, and we greatly appreciate that. We appreciate all the partnerships we've been able to make over the last couple of years to deal with the problems we've seen through the city, and we continue to look forward to those partnerships and any new ones that come aboard. Yeah, that's about it. I think we're good.
It's going to take a community to solve this, though. It can't be on just one agency's shoulders.
No, it's absolutely going to take the community involvement to change the tide.
So, social media website for you guys, chicopd.ca.gov or something.
It's actually, I believe, through the city's website, and then there's a link on it.
Okay.
City of Chico.
Do you know the Facebook or Instagram stuff?
Yeah, we have Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the wonderful social media platforms that everyone uses on a daily basis.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was an honor.
And educating me. It's been super informative.
And
if you guys like this episode, please rate us on iTunes and Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
This podcast has been brought to you by AMP.build, a software and digital design agency located in Chico, California. Learn more at www.amp.build. If you have ideas or questions for the show, send an email to hello@amp.build. We may air it on the next show.